Hey there, awesome viewers. Comment where you're watching from today and get ready for a story that'll remind you why you should never judge a book by its cover. On a busy Friday evening in Los Angeles, when the sun was just beginning to set and cast long shadows across the city's gleaming skyscrapers, an incident occurred at one of the most exclusive restaurants in Beverly Hills that would soon become the talk of the town. The establishment, known as Le Petit Jardin, was famous for its innovative fusion cuisine and its strict dress code that attracted the city's elite. The restaurant's ambient lighting created an atmosphere of sophistication, while the soft music playing in the background complemented the gentle clink of fine china and crystal glasses. James Morrison, the recently appointed restaurant manager, took great pride in maintaining what he considered to be the highest standards of excellence. With his perfectly pressed designer suit and meticulously styled hair, he carried himself with an air of superiority that often bordered on arrogance. Having worked his way up through some of the most prestigious restaurants in New York and Chicago, James believed he could spot wealth and status from a mile away. That evening, as the valet parking area filled with luxury vehicles and the reservation list read like a who's who of Hollywood, something unexpected happened that would shake James's carefully constructed world. A massive figure emerged from a surprisingly modest SUV, dressed in casual attire that definitely didn't match the restaurant's usual clientele. The man stood at an impressive 7 feet tall, wearing comfortable basketball shorts, a simple t-shirt and slides, an ensemble that couldn't have been further from Le Petit Jardin's formal dress code. The restaurant's host, David, immediately recognized the guest, but before he could step forward to greet him, James intercepted, his eyes narrowing at what he perceived as an obvious violation of the establishment's standards. The tall guest's casual appearance had already drawn curious glances from other patrons, but he seemed completely at ease, his warm smile and relaxed demeanor a stark contrast to James's rigid posture. As the gentle giant approached the podium, his presence seemed to fill the entire entrance area. Despite his casual attire, there was something commanding about his bearing, something that spoke of quiet confidence rather than the need to prove anything to anyone. He had called ahead for a table for 12, mentioning he was bringing his family for a special celebration. James, who had only recently moved to Los Angeles and was more concerned with fashion magazines than sports news, failed to recognize one of basketball's most legendary figures. Instead, all he saw was someone who didn't fit his narrow vision of what a high-end restaurant patron should look like. His lips curled into a slight smirk as he prepared to exercise what he believed was his authority to maintain the restaurant's prestigious reputation. The tension in the air was palpable as other staff members exchanged worried glances. They could sense that something momentous was about to unfold, though none dared to intervene. The restaurant's regular patrons had paused their conversations, their attention drawn to the unfolding scene like moths to a flame. The soft music that usually filled the air seemed to fade into the background, overshadowed by the weight of the impending confrontation. Little did James Morrison know that his next few words would not only change the course of his evening, but would also teach him a lesson about respect and humility that he wouldn't soon forget. He was about to learn that true class has nothing to do with designer labels or dress codes, and everything to do with how you treat others. The stage was set for a moment that would soon become viral on social media, shared countless times as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that respect should be given to everyone, regardless of how they're dressed. What happened next would not only transform James's perspective, but would also serve as a powerful lesson for anyone who's ever judged someone based on their appearance. As James prepared to address the casually dressed giant, he was completely unaware that this man not only had a net worth greater than the combined annual revenue of every restaurant he'd ever worked at, but was also one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the sports and entertainment industry. More importantly, James had no idea that this gentle giant had recently acquired ownership of several high-end restaurant chains in Los Angeles, including Le Petit Jardin. The security cameras would capture everything that was about to unfold, preserving a moment that would soon become a viral sensation and a powerful reminder about the importance of treating everyone with dignity and respect. As James opened his mouth to speak, the atmosphere in the restaurant grew thick with anticipation, like the calm before a storm. In the hearts of everyone present, there was a shared understanding that they were about to witness something extraordinary. The next few minutes would become a story told and retold, a modern-day parable about humility, respect, and the danger of making assumptions based on appearances. For James Morrison, it would become the most important lesson of his career, though not one he would learn in the way he might have expected. The gentle giant's family waited in their cars, excited about the celebration they had planned, unaware of the dramatic scene about to unfold in the restaurant's elegant entrance. They were about to become part of a story that would inspire millions and remind everyone that true greatness lies not in how you dress or what you own, but in how you treat others, especially when you think no one important is watching. As the evening sun cast its final golden rays through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows, the stage was set for an encounter that would remind everyone present, and millions more who would later watch the video, that life has a way of teaching its most valuable lessons to those who need them most. The next few moments would prove that sometimes the most powerful messages come wrapped in the most unexpected packages, and that wisdom often arrives in ways we least expect it. For James Morrison, this evening would become a turning point, though not in the way he imagined, as he straightened his designer tie and prepared to enforce what he believed was his duty as the guardian of the restaurant's prestigious reputation. He was about to learn that true prestige has nothing to do with dress codes and everything to do with the way we honor the dignity of every human being who crosses our path. Le Petit Jardin wasn't just any restaurant in Beverly Hills. It was an institution that had served the elite for over 3 decades. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over hand-painted murals depicting scenes from French gardens, while the carefully curated wine cellar housed vintages worth more than most people's annual salaries. The restaurant's reputation had been built not just on its exceptional cuisine, but on its ability to make every guest feel like royalty, or at least those who fit James Morrison's narrow definition of what royalty should look like. The evening had started like any other, with the soft melodies of jazz floating through the air and the gentle murmur of conversations in multiple languages, creating a sophisticated ambiance. The kitchen hummed with activity as Chef Antoine prepared his signature dishes, unaware of the situation brewing in the front of the house. The aroma of truffle-infused risotto and perfectly seared Wagyu beef wafted through the air, a testament to the culinary excellence that had earned the restaurant its coveted 3 Michelin stars. Regular patrons occupied their usual tables, movie producers discussing their next blockbuster over perfectly paired wines, tech moguls celebrating their latest acquisitions, and entertainment industry executives networking over expertly crafted appetizers. The restaurant's dress code was typically strict. Men in tailored suits or tuxedos, women in designer dresses and fine jewelry. It was a place where appearance meant everything, or so James Morrison believed. James had spent the last hour ensuring everything was perfect, from the precise angle of each wine glass to the immaculate spacing between place settings. His attention to detail was legendary among the staff. Though his tendency to treat them with the same cold superiority he showed to guests who didn't meet his standards had created an atmosphere of tension beneath the restaurant's polished surface. The valet parking area had been busy all evening, with a steady stream of luxury vehicles, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, and rare Italian sports cars arriving and departing in a carefully choreographed dance. When the modest SUV pulled up, it stood out like a dandelion in a garden of roses. The valet drivers exchanged glances, recognizing immediately who had arrived, their excitement barely contained despite their professional training. Inside, the restaurant's sophisticated lighting system had been programmed to gradually dim as the evening progressed, creating an increasingly intimate atmosphere. The bar area sparkled with cut crystal glasses and premium spirits, while the sommelier's station displayed a carefully curated selection of wines that would impress even the most discerning connoisseur. The gentle giant's arrival coincided with what industry insiders called the golden hour, that perfect moment when the setting sun's rays filtered through the restaurant's western windows, bathing everything in a warm, ethereal glow. It was as if nature itself was setting the stage for what was about to unfold, creating a theatrical backdrop for a lesson in humility that would soon go viral. James Morrison stood at his podium like a sentinel guarding the gates of paradise, his posture rigid and his expression stern. His journey to this position had been marked by a series of carefully calculated moves, each designed to advance his career in the high-stakes world of luxury dining. He had learned to identify wealth and status through subtle cues. The cut of a suit, the style of a watch, the way someone carried themselves, but his expertise was about to be challenged in a way he never expected. The restaurant's other staff members had developed an almost supernatural ability to read the room, to anticipate needs before they were expressed, to smooth over potential conflicts before they could escalate. Tonight, they could sense the electricity in the air, the potential for something extraordinary to unfold. Some of them had already recognized the famous guest, and their attempts to catch James's attention, to warn him, went unnoticed as he remained focused on what he perceived as a breach of the restaurant's sacred standards. The gentle giant's presence seemed to alter the very atmosphere of the space. Despite his casual attire, he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had nothing to prove, who had earned his success through talent, hard work, and perseverance. His smile was genuine, his eyes bright with the anticipation of celebrating with his family, unaware of the confrontation that was about to unfold. Behind the scenes, the kitchen staff continued their carefully choreographed dance of preparation and plating, their movements precise and purposeful. Chef Antoine had prepared special dishes for the evening, including some of his most innovative creations. The irony that these culinary masterpieces might never reach their intended recipient due to James's imminent intervention was not lost on the staff, who knew the identity of their special guest. The restaurant's private dining rooms, usually reserved for celebrities and high-profile business meetings, had been prepared for a large party. The largest of these rooms, with its stunning view of the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk, had been specially arranged for a group of 12. The table settings were immaculate, the chairs perfectly aligned, the temperature carefully controlled, all in preparation for a celebration that might never take place if James Morrison had his way. The other guests in the restaurant had begun to notice the tall figure in casual attire, but their reactions were far different from James's. There were subtle nods of recognition, excited whispers behind designer handbags, and discreet attempts to capture photos with smartphones. They knew who he was, not just a basketball legend, but a successful businessman, a philanthropist, and one of the most beloved personalities in Los Angeles. Years of experience in the hospitality industry had taught James Morrison to handle difficult situations with diplomatic flair, but his blind spot when it came to judging people solely on their appearance was about to lead him into the most challenging moment of his career. His grip on the reservation book tightened as he prepared to address what he saw as an affront to the restaurant's standards, unaware that he was about to become an object lesson in the dangers of prejudgment. The gentle giant's family waited in their cars, their excitement building for what was supposed to be a joyous celebration. They had chosen Le Petit Jardin not just for its reputation for excellent food, but because it represented a new chapter in their loved one's ever-expanding business empire. The irony of the situation that was about to unfold would not be lost on them when they finally learned what had transpired. The restaurant's security cameras continued their silent vigilance, their lenses capturing every detail of what was about to become a viral moment. In the age of social media, where moments of public humiliation and redemption are shared millions of times, this encounter would soon join the pantheon of stories that remind people about the importance of looking beyond surface appearances. As James Morrison prepared to speak, the atmosphere in the restaurant seemed to pause, like an orchestra holding its breath between movements. The gentle giant stood patiently, his years of experience in dealing with prejudice and preconceptions evident in his calm demeanor. He had faced far greater challenges than an overzealous restaurant manager, and his response to what was about to unfold would demonstrate why he was respected, not just for his athletic achievements, but for his character. The stage was set for a confrontation that would remind everyone present, and millions more who would later witness it online, that true class has nothing to do with clothing or appearances, and everything to do with how we treat others. As the final rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, James Morrison was about to learn that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the people we're quickest to judge. James Morrison cleared his throat, his voice carrying that particular tone of condescension that he had perfected over years of dealing with what he considered to be undesirable patrons. "I apologize, sir," he began, emphasizing the honorific with subtle mockery. "But we maintain a strict dress code here at Le Petit Jardin. Perhaps you might be more comfortable at one of the casual establishments down the street. I believe there's a sports bar that might be more suitable for your attire." The gentle giant's expression remained unchanged, his eyes twinkling with an understanding that spoke of years of dealing with similar situations. Around them, the restaurant had grown quieter as conversations naturally died down and attention shifted to the unfolding scene. Several staff members shifted uncomfortably, their faces reflecting a mix of embarrassment and anticipation. "You see," James continued, warming to his theme, "our establishment caters to a certain clientele. We require proper evening attire, suits for gentlemen, formal dresses for ladies. Your current outfit, while I'm sure is comfortable, falls somewhat short of our standards." He gestured dismissively at the basketball shorts and t-shirt, his lips curling into a slight smirk. The restaurant's host, David, had begun to move forward, his face pale with recognition and horror at what was unfolding, but James waved him away with an imperious flick of his wrist. "I'll handle this," he said, his voice carrying that special kind of authority used by those who have never faced serious consequences for their actions. "I understand you have a reservation for 12, James continued, making a show of consulting his book, though his tone suggested he didn't believe such a reservation could possibly exist. "But I'm afraid I simply cannot accommodate your party this evening. Perhaps if you return another time, properly attired." He let the sentence hang in the air like a judge delivering a verdict. The gentle giant's response was surprisingly gentle, his deep voice carrying none of the anger or frustration that James's words seemed designed to provoke. "I appreciate your concern about the dress code," he said, "but I called ahead about this celebration. I believe everything was arranged with the owner." James's laugh was short and dismissive. I can assure you, sir, that I am in regular contact with the owner, and I have received no such instructions. In fact, he added, unable to resist the opportunity to display his authority, I personally approve all special arrangements for our VIP guests. The irony of his statement hung in the air like the crystal chandeliers above them, unnoticed only by James himself. Several patrons had already pulled out their phones, sensing they were witnessing something that would soon become a viral sensation. The maître d', standing a few feet away, had covered his face with one hand, unable to watch the train wreck unfolding before him. Perhaps, James continued, his voice dripping with false solicitude, you've confused us with another establishment? It happens more often than you might think. People sometimes mistake our restaurant for more casual venues. He emphasized the word casual as if it were a particularly distasteful condition. The gentle giant's companion, a sharply dressed man who had entered just behind him, attempted to intervene. Sir, I really think you should. But James cut him off with another dismissive wave. I'm handling this situation, he said, not even bothering to look at the man who was, in fact, the giant's business manager. Let me be perfectly clear, James continued, straightening his designer tie as if preparing for battle. Our establishment maintains certain standards. These standards are not negotiable, not even for someone of your stature. He paused, obviously pleased with his own wordplay. We have celebrities, business leaders, and distinguished guests who expect a particular atmosphere when they dine here. The gentle giant's continued calm seemed to irritate James further, pushing him to become even more condescending. I'm sure you understand, he said, though his tone suggested he doubted any such understanding was possible. We have to consider our regular clientele. People who come here expect a certain level of sophistication. Behind James, the restaurant's staff had begun to gather, their faces showing various degrees of horror and disbelief. One of the senior waiters was frantically typing on his phone, presumably trying to contact someone who could put a stop to this disaster in progress. But James, caught up in his own performance, remained oblivious to the mounting tension around him. Now, James said, reaching for a stack of business cards on his podium, I'd be happy to recommend several other restaurants that might be more appropriate for your style. He emphasized the last word while giving another dismissive glance at the casual attire, places where the dress code is more flexible. The gentle giant's business manager had pulled out his phone and appeared to be making a call. But James interpreted this as another sign of his victory. Yes, perhaps you should call ahead to one of those other establishments. I'm sure they'll be able to accommodate you without all this unpleasantness. Throughout this entire exchange, the gentle giant maintained his composure, showing the kind of patience that comes from years of dealing with people who judge books by their covers. His slight smile never wavered, though there was now a glimmer of something else in his eyes. Not anger, but perhaps amusement at the situation's absurdity. You see, James continued, warming to his theme, Le Petit Jardin isn't just a restaurant, it's an experience. Our guests expect to dine alongside people of similar caliber. He paused, clearly enjoying what he perceived as his masterful handling of an uncomfortable situation. I'm sure you understand that maintaining these standards is what keeps these exclusive. The word exclusive hung in the air like a challenge, but the gentle giant simply nodded, his expression thoughtful. Around them, the other diners had largely abandoned any pretense of eating, their attention fully focused on the drama unfolding at the entrance. Several had recognized the famous figure and were watching with expressions that ranged from embarrassment to anticipation. Perhaps, James added, unable to resist one final dig, you might want to consider making a reservation at one of our competitors' establishments. I hear they're much more accommodating when it comes to dress code violations. He emphasized the word violations, as if he were discussing a criminal offense rather than a pair of basketball shorts. The Gentle Giant's business manager had finished his phone call and was now standing with a slight smile on his face, checking his watch as if waiting for something. This should have been James's first warning sign, but he was too caught up in his own performance to notice. "I must insist," James continued, his voice taking on an edge of finality, "that you leave the premises now. We have other guests arriving shortly, who have made proper arrangements and are dressed appropriately for our establishment." He gestured toward the door, making it clear that he expected immediate compliance with his directive. The restaurant had fallen completely silent, now the only sounds being the soft background music and the gentle clink of ice in water glasses. Even the kitchen staff had begun to peek through the service doors, drawn by the unusual quiet in the dining room. The tension in the air was palpable, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. James Morrison stood at his podium, radiating what he believed to be authority and sophistication, completely unaware that he was about to become the subject of a viral video that would serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of judgment and arrogance. His perfect posture and immaculate appearance would soon stand in stark contrast to his impending humiliation. The Gentle Giant remained unmoved, both physically and emotionally, by James's increasingly aggressive dismissal. His calm demeanor seemed to fill the space around him, making James's attempts at intimidation seem increasingly petty and small. It was clear to everyone present, except James himself, that they were witnessing a masterclass in grace under pressure. As James opened his mouth to deliver what he undoubtedly thought would be the final word on the matter, the front doors of the restaurant opened again. The arrival of this new player in the unfolding drama would mark the beginning of James Morrison's education in the true meaning of class, status, and respect, though not in the way he might have expected. The new arrival was Roland DuPont, the regional director of restaurant operations, his face flushed from what appeared to be a rather hurried entrance. James Morrison's expression brightened momentarily, confident that his superior would back his stance on maintaining the restaurant's high standards. However, the look of barely contained panic on Roland's face should have been his second warning sign. "Mr. Morrison," Roland began, his voice carrying a tremor that James completely misinterpreted as support for his position. "I see you've met our new owner." The words hung in the air like suspended crystal, catching the light and refracting it into thousands of tiny revelations that had yet to reach James's consciousness. But James, still riding high on his perceived authority, didn't register the significance of Roland's words. Instead, he let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Roland, I was just explaining to this gentleman about our dress code policy. Perhaps you could help me direct him to a more suitable establishment?" The collective intake of breath from the restaurant staff was audible. Roland's face had turned an even deeper shade of red, while the Gentle Giant's business manager was now openly smirking. Several of the regular patrons had their hands over their mouths, either in shock or to hide their emerging smiles. "You seem very concerned about maintaining standards," the Gentle Giant said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that comes from genuine accomplishment rather than borrowed importance. "Tell me more about these standards you're so passionate about protecting." James, completely missing the shift in the room's atmosphere, launched into what he clearly thought would be his winning argument. "Our standards are what set us apart from ordinary restaurants. We cater to sophisticated clientele, business, leaders, celebrities, people who understand the value of presentation and decorum." Roland DuPont had begun making frantic gestures behind James's back, but the restaurant manager was too engrossed in his speech to notice. "For instance," James continued, "just last week we hosted the CEO of a major corporation, someone who understands the importance of proper attire and behavior. "That's fascinating," the gentle giant replied, his smile growing slightly wider. "Was that before or after the ownership changed hands?" James waved his hand dismissively. "The ownership is irrelevant. I maintain these standards regardless of who signs the checks. In fact," he added, warming to his theme, "I've been instrumental in maintaining our reputation through several ownership changes." The gentle giant nodded thoughtfully. "And these standards, they're more important than making guests feel welcome, more important than treating people with respect regardless of their appearance." "Respect must be earned," James declared, straightening his tie again. "And in an establishment of this caliber, that begins with proper attire. I'm sure someone like you can understand that success requires maintaining certain appearances." The irony of his statement caused several nearby diners to choke on their drinks. Roland DuPont had given up on his frantic signaling and was now standing with his head in his hands, looking like he wished the expensive marble floor would open up and swallow him whole. "Success requires maintaining appearances," the gentle giant repeated slowly. "That's an interesting perspective. Tell me, what does success look like to you, Mr. Morrison?" James seized upon what he thought was an opportunity to demonstrate his expertise. Success in this industry is about exclusivity, about maintaining standards that separate us from ordinary establishments. It's about creating an environment where our elite clientele feels comfortable, where they don't have to mingle with people like me, the gentle giant finished, his voice still carrying that same calm authority. "Exactly," James exclaimed, missing the dangerous territory he was entering. "Our clients expect to dine alongside people of similar status and sophistication. When someone comes in dressed like—" He gestured at the casual attire. "Well, it disrupts the entire atmosphere we've worked so hard to create." The gentle giant's business manager had pulled out his phone and appeared to be recording the exchange, which only encouraged James further. "Perhaps," James continued, "you could return another time, properly dressed, and experience what true fine dining is meant to be." "And what is fine dining meant to be?" the gentle giant asked, his question carrying a weight that James completely missed. "It's about sophistication, culture, understanding the finer things in life," James declared. "It's about knowing how to present yourself in a manner that commands respect. Surely you can see how your current attire falls short of these requirements." Roland DuPont had moved to the house phone and was speaking urgently into it, while several of the regular patrons had begun to shake their heads in disbelief. The restaurant staff had gathered in a tight cluster, their expressions ranging from mortification to morbid fascination. "Commands respect," the gentle giant repeated, thoughtfully. "And you believe respect is something that comes from the clothes you wear?" "Of course," James replied, gesturing to his own immaculate suit. "Presentation is everything in this business. Our clientele expects to see a certain level of sophistication in their fellow diners." The gentle giant glanced around the restaurant, taking in the faces of the other patrons, many of whom were now trying to catch his eye with apologetic looks. "And all these people," he said, "they share your view about what constitutes proper sophistication?" "Absolutely," James declared, completely misreading the room. "Our regular clients understand the importance of maintaining these standards. That's why they choose Le Petit Jardin over other less discriminating establishments." The word discriminating hung in the air like a warning bell, but James plowed ahead, oblivious to the growing discomfort around him. "In fact," he continued, "I've personally turned away numerous people who didn't meet our standards. It's about protecting our reputation, you see." "Protecting your reputation," the gentle giant repeated, each word carrying a weight that should have warned James about the thin ice he was treading on. "And how do you decide who meets these standards?" James gestured at his own attire again. It's quite simple, really. Proper evening wear, appropriate accessories, a certain bearing, things that indicate someone belongs in an establishment of this caliber. The gentle giant's business manager had now moved to stand beside Roland Dupont, both men watching the exchange with expressions that suggested they were witnessing a slow-motion car crash. Several of the regular patrons had begun to gather there, things as if preparing for the inevitable explosion. And in your experience, the gentle giant continued, his voice still maintaining that remarkable calm, these external appearances, they're always a reliable indicator of someone's worth. Of course, James declared, his confidence growing with what he perceived as the opportunity to educate someone about the finer points of high-end restaurant management. You can always tell a person's status by how they present themselves. It's about maintaining standards, you see. The gentle giant nodded slowly. And these standards, they're more important than treating people with basic human dignity, more important than judging someone by their character rather than their clothes? James let out a short, dismissive laugh. Character is reflected in how one presents oneself. Someone who truly understood success and sophistication would know better than to attempt to enter an establishment like this, dressed as you are. The restaurant had grown so quiet that the soft background music seemed suddenly loud in comparison. Even the kitchen staff had stopped their work, drawn to the unfolding drama like moths to a flame. The tension in the air was almost tangible, like the moment before a lightning strike. Success and sophistication, the gentle giant mused. And you consider yourself an expert on recognizing these qualities? Absolutely, James declared, standing even straighter. It's my job to ensure that our establishment maintains its reputation for excellence and exclusivity. And part of that job is preventing inappropriate elements from disrupting our atmosphere. The phrase inappropriate elements caused Roland Dupont to make a sound somewhere between a gasp and a groan. The gentle giant's business manager had stopped recording and was now typing frantically on his phone, presumably alerting others to the unfolding situation. I see, the gentle giant said, his voice carrying a note of finality that should have warned James that the conversation was about to take a dramatic turn. And what would you say if I told you that your understanding of success, sophistication, and respect might need some revision? James's laugh was sharp and dismissive. I think so that you're hardly in a position to lecture me about success or sophistication. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual paying customers to attend to. The gentle giant reached into his pocket, causing James to take an instinctive step back. But what emerged was not what anyone expected, and it would mark the beginning of James Morrison's very public lesson in humility, respect, and the true meaning of class. From the gentle giant's pocket emerged a business card, not just any business card, but one bearing the distinctive logo of the restaurant group that had recently acquired Le Petit Jardin. The card was elegant in its simplicity, with raised gold lettering that caught the light. But it was the name on the card that would soon shatter James Morrison's carefully constructed world of presumptions and prejudice. Roland Dupont stepped forward, his voice carrying a mix of respect and barely contained exasperation. Mr. Morrison, allow me to properly introduce you to Shaquille O'Neal, NBA Hall of Famer, successful entrepreneur, and as of last week, the new owner of our restaurant group, including Le Petit Jardin. The color drained from James's face so rapidly that several nearby patrons wondered if he might faint. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound emerged. The business card in Shaq's hand seemed to mock everything James had spent the last 15 minutes pontificating about. James stammered, his perfectly cultivated professional demeanor crumbling like a house of cards in a hurricane. The tie he had been adjusting so proudly now felt like it was choking him. Shaq's business manager stepped forward, his phone still recording. Mr. O'Neill not only owns this restaurant, but has acquired the entire chain of high-end establishments across Los Angeles. His investment portfolio includes numerous successful ventures in the hospitality industry, not to mention his multiple business degrees and doctoral studies. The revelation rippled through the restaurant like a shockwave. Regular patrons who had recognized Shaq from the beginning were now shaking their heads at James's spectacular display of poor judgment. Several of them had their phones out, and it was clear this moment would soon be trending on social media. But James managed to squeak out, "The dress code, our standards." Shaq's voice remained as calm and measured as it had been throughout the entire exchange. "Standards are important, Mr. Morrison, but the most important standards aren't about what someone wears. They're about how we treat people. Every person who walks through that door deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their appearance." The restaurant staff had begun to emerge from their hiding places, drawn by the dramatic turn of events. Many of them were trying to suppress smiles, having endured James's imperious attitude for months. The kitchen staff, led by Chef Antoine, had gathered at the service entrance, watching the scene unfold with undisguised satisfaction. "You see," Shaq continued, his voice carrying easily through the now silent restaurant, "I could have walked in here wearing the finest suit money can buy. I could have arrived in a Rolls-Royce instead of my SUV. I could have sent my assistant ahead to announce my arrival. But I wanted to see how this restaurant truly operates, how it treats people who don't fit your narrow definition of sophisticated." James's legs seemed to have turned to jelly, and he gripped the podium for support. The reservation book he had wielded like a weapon of exclusion now lay forgotten, its pages open to reveal the very reservation he had tried to dismiss. "Your attitude," Shaq continued, "tells me everything I need to know about the changes that need to be made here. True class isn't about what you wear or how much money you have. It's about how you treat others, especially when you think they can't do anything for you." Roland DuPont stepped forward again, his face still flushed but now wearing an expression of grim determination. "Mr. Morrison, perhaps you'd like to take a moment to compose yourself in my office. We have some matters to discuss regarding your approach to customer service." But Shaq held up a hand. "No need for that just yet. I think Mr. Morrison might benefit from seeing how real hospitality works." He turned to address the other diners, his natural charisma filling the room. "I apologize to everyone for this disruption. Please enjoy your meals. Your checks tonight will be taken care of as my way of apologizing for this unfortunate scene." Murmur of appreciation swept through the restaurant, though most patrons seemed more interested in witnessing the continued unfolding of this dramatic moment than in their complimentary meals. Several people had stood up to get a better view, while others were already typing furiously on their phones, no doubt sharing the story on social media. James's world had shrunk to a pinpoint, his carefully constructed facade of superiority crumbling with each passing second. The designer suit that he had worn like armor now felt like a costume. His polished shoes suddenly seemed to be made of lead, and his perfectly styled hair felt like it was standing on end. "You see, Mr. Morrison," Shaq continued, his voice carrying no trace of anger or revenge, only a teacher's patience. "I've been on both sides of this equation. I've been judged by my appearance, and I've had the privilege of proving those judgments wrong. Success isn't about looking down on others, it's about lifting people up." The Gentle Giant's business manager was still recording, capturing what would soon become a viral lesson in humility and respect. Around the restaurant, phones continued to emerge from purses and pockets as diners realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. "When I bought this restaurant group," Shaq explained, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, I didn't do it just as a business investment. I did it because I believe in creating spaces where everyone feels welcome, where success is measured not just in profits, but in how we treat each other. James had begun to sway slightly, his face alternating between deathly pale and burning red. The podium he had used as his judgment seat now seemed to be the only thing keeping him upright. His perfectly pressed suit had developed noticeable wrinkles, as if his clothes were physically expressing the stress he was under. Your definition of success, Shaq continued, seems to be based entirely on appearances. But let me tell you what real success looks like. Real success is creating an environment where every guest feels valued. Real sophistication is treating others with dignity, regardless of how they're dressed. Real class? That's something no designer suit can give you. The restaurant's regular patrons, many of whom had endured James's condescending attitude in the past, were now watching with undisguised satisfaction. Several of them nodded in agreement with Shaq's words, while others whispered among themselves, no doubt sharing their own stories of encounters with the overzealous manager. "I've achieved success in basketball, in business, in education," Shaq said, his voice remaining measured but firm. "But none of that success would mean anything if I used it to look down on others. The true measure of a person isn't in how they treat their superiors. It's in how they treat those they think can't help them." Roland Dupont had produced a handkerchief and was dabbing at his forehead, while the restaurant staff had formed a loose semicircle around the scene, their expressions a mix of awe and vindication. Chef Antoine had emerged from the kitchen, his whites immaculate, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "So here's what's gonna happen," Shaq announced, his voice taking on the tone of someone used to making decisions that stick. "First, we're going to seat my family for the celebration we came here to enjoy. Then, tomorrow morning, we're going to have a long discussion about the true meaning of hospitality and what standards really matter in this industry." The implications of tomorrow morning hit James like a physical blow. His legs finally gave out, and he had to be helped to a nearby chair by two servers who seemed to take perhaps a bit more satisfaction in his distress than strictly necessary. "But for now," Shaq continued, turning to address the other diners, "let's return to what this evening should be about. Good food, good company, and the kind of welcome that makes everyone feel valued." He paused, then added with a smile that lit up the room, "And yes, the dress code will be getting some revision." A spontaneous burst of applause erupted from the dining room, started by a table of regular patrons and quickly spreading throughout the restaurant. Even the kitchen staff joined in, their applause mixing with the clinking of glasses and the general murmur of appreciation. As Shaq's family began to enter the restaurant, each of them dressed casually but carrying themselves with natural dignity, James Morrison remained slumped in his chair, watching as his carefully constructed world of artificial sophistication crumbled around him. The lesson in true class, success and respect had been delivered not with anger or revenge, but with the kind of grace that no designer suit could ever provide. The evening air in Le Petit Jardin had transformed, as if the restaurant itself was breathing a collective sigh of relief. The tight, restrictive atmosphere that James Morrison had cultivated over months of zealous gatekeeping had been replaced by something warmer, more genuine. The gentle Giants family was now seated in the private dining room, their laughter and conversation adding a welcome note of authenticity to the restaurant's carefully orchestrated ambiance. James Morrison remained in his chair, looking like a man who had just witnessed his entire worldview being dismantled piece by piece. His designer suit, which had seemed so armor-like earlier, now hung on him like a costume he'd borrowed for a role he'd badly miscast himself in. The other staff members moved around him as if he were a statue, a monument to the dangers of judgment and presumption. Shaq, meanwhile, had transformed the energy of the entire establishment simply by being himself. He stopped at various tables, greeting other diners with genuine warmth, taking photos with children, and showing the kind of natural grace that no amount of formal training could instill. The contrast between his authentic charm and James's artificial sophistication couldn't have been more stark. Roland Dupont, who had recovered some of his composure, was now quietly explaining to James what would happen next. "Mr. O'Neill has been planning this acquisition for months," he said, his voice low but clear. "He's been visiting all our locations incognito, assessing not just the food and service, but how we treat all our guests. Tonight was meant to be a celebration of the completion of that acquisition." The irony of the timing wasn't lost on anyone. Within earshot, several nearby diners were still recording discreetly on their phones, knowing they were witnessing something that would soon become a viral sensation. The hashtag Duck Le Petit Lesson was already trending on social media, with clips of James's earlier behavior being shared and commented on by thousands. Chef Antoine had emerged from the kitchen again, this time carrying a specially prepared tasting menu for Shaq's family. The celebrated chef, known for his culinary creativity, had prepared dishes that paid homage to both the restaurant's French heritage and Shaq's personal journey from athlete to business mogul. It was a perfect fusion of tradition and innovation, much like the changes that were clearly coming to Le Petit Jardin. "You see, Mr. Morrison," Roland continued, his voice taking on a mentoring tone, "what Mr. O'Neill understands, and what we should have understood, is that true luxury isn't about exclusion. It's about creating an experience that elevates everyone who walks through our doors, regardless of what they're wearing or where they come from." The restaurant's regular patrons, many of whom were business leaders and celebrities themselves, were nodding in agreement. Several of them had begun sharing their own stories of times they'd been judged by their appearance, of moments when they'd chosen to dine at establishments that valued character over clothing. "The dress code," Roland explained, "was never meant to be a weapon. It was meant to be a guideline, a way to create an atmosphere. But somewhere along the way, we forgot that the most important atmosphere in a restaurant isn't created by what people wear. It's created by how people feel when they're here." James's face registered each word like a physical blow. His carefully maintained expression of superiority had been replaced by something more genuine and far more human. The transformation was painful to watch, but necessary, like watching someone wake up from a long-held delusion. Shaq's business manager approached their table, his phone now tucked away. "Mr. O'Neill would like you to know," he said, addressing James directly, "that this evening will not result in your immediate termination." The relief on James's face was palpable, but short-lived. "Instead, you're being reassigned to our new community outreach program." The implications of this announcement took a moment to sink in. The community outreach program was one of Shaq's signature initiatives, designed to make fine dining more accessible to communities that had traditionally been excluded from such experiences. James Morrison, the self-appointed guardian of exclusivity, would now be responsible for helping to break down the very barriers he had so zealously maintained. "Starting next week," the business manager continued, "you'll be working with our team to organize special dining events for underprivileged youth, community leaders, and local organizations. Mr. O'Neill believes that everyone deserves to experience fine dining, and more importantly, everyone deserves to be treated with respect when they do." The poetic justice of this assignment wasn't lost on anyone present. Several of the regular patrons had stopped pretending not to listen and were openly watching the scene unfold. A few were smiling, while others nodded approvingly at this unexpected but fitting resolution. "Additionally," Roland added, "you'll be participating in our new sensitivity and inclusion training program. Mr. O'Neill has arranged for experts in hospitality and community relations to help our staff understand the true meaning of service and respect. Throughout the restaurant, the atmosphere had continued to evolve. The strict, formal environment that had previously defined Le Petit Jardin was being replaced by something more genuine. The music seemed warmer, the lighting more welcoming, and the conversations more natural. It was as if the restaurant itself was breathing a sigh of relief, finally free to be what it was always meant to be, a place where fine dining and genuine hospitality could coexist. Shaq's family celebration was in full swing now, their joy and laughter providing a perfect soundtrack to the evening's transformative events. The other diners had begun to relax as well, their postures becoming more natural, their conversations more animated. The invisible walls of pretension that had previously divided the space were dissolving, replaced by an atmosphere of authentic elegance. Mr. O'Neill believes, the business manager continued, that this evening can serve as a teaching moment not just for you, but for the entire industry. He's already received calls from other restaurant owners wanting to review their own policies and practices. Your interaction with him will be used with faces blurred and names changed as part of our new training materials. James Morrison, who had spent years building his reputation as a guardian of exclusivity, now found himself becoming an unwitting ambassador for inclusion. The irony was not lost on him, as evidenced by the subtle shifts in his expression as he processed each new piece of information. But perhaps the most important lesson, Roland added, his voice gentle but firm, is that true success in this industry isn't measured by how many people you keep out, but by how many people you welcome in. Mr. O'Neill has built his business empire on this principle, and now he's giving you the opportunity to learn it firsthand. Throughout the restaurant, phones continued to buzz with notifications as the story spread across social media. The hashtag Le Petit Lesson had evolved into Le Petit Learning, with people sharing their own stories of times they'd been judged by their appearance and how they'd overcome those judgments. Chef Antoine returned from the kitchen once more, this time carrying a special dessert he had created on the spot, a chocolate sculpture that somehow managed to incorporate both a basketball and a French fleur-de-lis, a perfect symbol of the evening's unlikely fusion of worlds. The other diners applauded spontaneously as it was presented to Shaq's table, recognizing the chef's artistic celebration of this momentous evening. Tomorrow, Roland concluded, we'll begin the process of reviewing and revising all our policies. Mr. O'Neill wants to ensure that while we maintain our commitment to excellent food and service, we also create an environment where everyone feels welcome and valued. You'll be an important part of that process, Mr. Morrison, though perhaps not in the way you might have expected. As the evening drew to a close, the lessons of the night had settled over Le Petit Jardin like a fine mist, transforming everything they touched. The restaurant's future was taking shape, one where excellence and inclusivity would go hand in hand, where true sophistication would be measured not by what guests wore, but by how they were made to feel. James Morrison remained in his chair, watching as Shaq continued to demonstrate what real class looked like, not through words or rules, but through actions and attitude. The lesson had been delivered not with anger or revenge, but with the kind of grace that no dress code could ever capture, no policy could ever enforce, and no amount of designer clothing could ever convey. The story of what happened that evening at Le Petit Jardin spread across social media like wildfire, becoming more than just another viral moment. It became a movement. The security footage, combined with dozens of cell phone videos from different angles, painted a complete picture of an encounter that would change not just one restaurant's culture, but spark a nationwide conversation about judgment, respect, and true class. The following morning, as news channels picked up the story, interviews with witnesses began to emerge. Regular patrons of Le Petit Jardin shared their own experiences, both positive and negative, painting a picture of how a culture of exclusivity had slowly transformed a fine dining establishment into a fortress of prejudice. But more importantly, they shared their observations of how one person's grace under pressure had transformed an potentially ugly confrontation into a powerful teaching moment. "What struck me most," said one elderly patron who had been dining at Le Petit Jardin for over 2 decades, "wasn't just Mr. O'Neill's patience during the confrontation, but how he turned it into an opportunity for growth rather than punishment. That's real leadership, real class." Social media exploded with similar stories from across the country. Tales of people being judged by their appearance in high-end establishments, stories of assumptions made and opportunities denied based on nothing more than first impressions. But unlike many viral moments that focus solely on the negative, this one sparked a different kind of conversation. Dress code reform began trending as restaurants across the nation started reviewing their own policies. Young entrepreneurs shared stories of being turned away from important business meetings because they wore sneakers with their suits. Successful tech executives posted photos of themselves in hoodies and flip-flops, standing next to their company logos. The conversation wasn't about abolishing standards. It was about redefining what those standards really mean. Celebrity. Chiefs and restaurant owners began sharing their own perspectives on hospitality and inclusion. Many admitted to having similar policies, but never questioning their impact. The video of James Morrison's confrontation with Shaq became required viewing in hospitality management courses, sparking discussions about the difference between maintaining standards and creating barriers. But perhaps the most powerful responses came from ordinary people who saw themselves in the story. A young woman in Detroit shared how she'd saved for months to take her mother to an upscale restaurant for her birthday, only to be treated with disdain because they didn't look sophisticated enough. A successful businessman in Atlanta posted about wearing his workout clothes to buy his first luxury car, testing how different dealerships would treat him. The stories poured in, each one adding another layer to the conversation about appearance, assumption, and respect. Le Petit Jardin itself became a case study in transformation. Under Shaq's ownership, the restaurant maintained its commitment to excellent food and service, but reimagined what luxury dining could be. The revised dress code was simple. Dress as you are, be who you are, respect everyone around you. The restaurant's reputation didn't suffer. In fact, it grew, becoming known as a place where true sophistication meant making everyone feel valued. James Morrison's journey became part of the story too. His assignment to the community outreach program wasn't just a punishment, it was an opportunity for redemption. In the months that followed, he would learn more about true class from the communities he once would have excluded than he had in all his years of enforcing dress codes and judging appearances. The video of that evening continued to circulate. But what made it powerful wasn't just the confrontation, it was the resolution. People shared it not to mock James Morrison's mistake, but to celebrate the possibility of change, to acknowledge that sometimes our worst moments can lead to our greatest growth. Shaq's handling of the situation became a masterclass in leadership and grace. Business schools began using the incident as a case study in crisis management and cultural transformation. But more than that, it became a touchstone for discussions about what really matters in how we treat each other. The evening's events sparked a movement called Beyond Appearances, encouraging people to share stories of times they'd been underestimated or misjudged, but also stories of times they'd learned to look past their own prejudices. The hashtag became a platform for discussing how we judge others, and more importantly, how we can do better. Restaurant industry professionals began sharing their own stories of transformation, of moments when they realized they'd been enforcing rules without questioning their purpose. Luxury establishments across the country started reviewing their policies, asking themselves whether they were maintaining standards or creating unnecessary barriers. But perhaps the most powerful impact was on individual viewers who saw themselves in the story, either as someone who had faced judgment or someone who had been too quick to judge others. The comments section of every shared video became a space for reflection and discussion. I used to be just like that manager, thinking I could judge someone's worth by their clothes. This video changed my perspective completely. Watching Shaq handle that situation with such grace made me realize that true class has nothing to do with what you're wearing. I've been that person in casual clothes being judged at a fancy place. Seeing this gives me hope that things can change. The story resonated because it touched on something universal: the human tendency to judge books by their covers and the possibility of learning to see beyond surface appearances. It sparked conversations in homes, workplaces, and classrooms about how we treat others and what really defines class and sophistication. Teachers began using the video to discuss respect and judgment with their students. Corporate trainers incorporated it into workshops about unconscious bias and inclusive leadership. Religious leaders referenced it in sermons about treating all people with dignity. The incident had transcended its original context to become a parable for our times. Luxury brands even began to rethink their marketing strategies, recognizing that true luxury isn't about exclusion, but about making everyone feel valued. Some high-end establishments started training their staff to focus on making every guest feel welcome, regardless of their appearance or attire. The story's impact continued to ripple outward, touching lives in unexpected ways. A group of successful entrepreneurs started a program providing fine dining experiences to underprivileged youth, teaching them not just about food, but about confidence and self-worth. Restaurant industry veterans began mentoring programs focused on creating more inclusive hospitality environments. But perhaps the most powerful testament to the evening's impact came from the countless messages Shaq received from people who had been inspired to handle their own confrontations with similar grace, to choose education over humiliation, growth over punishment. The incident at Le Petit Jardin became more than just another viral moment. It became a catalyst for change, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful lessons come from unexpected places, and that true class isn't about what you wear or how you look, but how you treat others, especially when you think no one important is watching. So now we ask you, our viewers, have you ever been judged by your appearance? Have you ever caught yourself making assumptions about others based on how they look? Share your stories in the comments below. Let's continue this important conversation about looking beyond appearances and treating everyone with the respect they deserve. Remember, true class isn't about the clothes you wear or the car you drive. It's about how you treat others. It's about understanding that every person who crosses your path deserves respect, regardless of how they're dressed or what you assume about their status. Like and share this video if you believe in the power of treating everyone with dignity and respect. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of what really matters in life. Ring that notification bell to make sure you never miss another video that could change your perspective and help make the world a little bit better. And remember, the next time you're tempted to judge someone by their appearance, think about this evening at Le Petit Jardin. Think about how one person's grace under pressure transformed a moment of prejudice into an opportunity for growth and learning. Because, in the end, we all have the power to choose how we treat others. We all have the opportunity to look beyond appearances and see the real person standing in front of us. And maybe, just maybe, by sharing this story and continuing this conversation, we can all play a part in creating a world where everyone feels valued, respected, and welcome. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to let us know where you're watching from. Until next time, remember, real class isn't about what you wear, it's about how you wear it, and more importantly, how you treat others while wearing it. Stay classy, stay kind, and we'll see you in the next video.